Any weapons on you, sir?
No. I did not commit these crimes, and so I plan to appeal my convictions.
Now Henderson is charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson in connection with the death of 19-year-old Sade Robinson.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin is a city built on beer, hard work, and a strong sense of community. But in April of 2024, that sense of safety was shattered when a human leg washed ashore at dawn. At first, police feared it was merely just an accident, but what they found next would spiral into one of the most disturbing murder cases that the city has ever seen, and it would take investigators on a wild hunt for a killer through surveillance footage, witness reports, and forensic evidence. And as people learned of Sade Robinson and the revolting man behind her murder, many people began to wonder if maybe he was possibly even a serial killer. Hey folks, my name is Adrian, and in today's video, we're traveling to Milwaukee where, in 2024, a closely guarded mystery turned into an outrageous murder. The world of dating has changed so much in the rise of the internet, some for the better, but mostly for the worst, in my opinion. I mean, being honest with you, I think we've lost touch of the way of traditional dating. And unfortunately, we have seen some pretty horrific crimes coming out of dating apps like Hinge, Tinder, Bumble, and Poff. I mean, some have even amounted to murder, and this case is no different. Now, before we begin, I'd like to remind you that Coffee House Crime covers a range of strange, dark, and disturbing stories. Stories that require patience, delicacy, and time. It's actually a very big change to what I used to do around about 5 years ago, because as some of you will already know, once upon a time I used to be an engineer, and although the pay was good, that corporate work never really fulfilled me. I never really felt like I had this purpose. I mean, being quite honest, for years, I felt this quiet sense of emptiness and dread. The moment that COVID hit and I found myself at home with free time was the moment that I started YouTube. And looking back, it's probably the best decision that I ever made. Actually, make that second, of course after adopting Nero. So, I was very lucky to find YouTube and eventually you guys. But it does make me wonder, how many of you are still silently sitting in that loop of quiet emptiness and dread? So, pragmatically speaking, the question that I have for you right now is, are you happy where you are right now? Are you comfortable? Or is it more a case that you're ready to start building toward work that you actually care about, but need the credentials to get there? Because look, if your answer to happiness wasn't an immediate yes, then I'd like to tell you about this video's sponsor, Southern New Hampshire University. And honestly, this one feels very on brand for me, because if you're anything like me, then you're probably always trying to find ways to level up your life. And I'm talking new skills, new goals, or maybe even a completely new direction in life, just like I did. And all of that is extremely exciting stuff, right? But the problem is always the exact same thing. It's time. And thankfully, that is precisely where SNHU makes things surprisingly doable. Southern New Hampshire University is one of the largest accredited universities in the United States, with some of the most affordable online tuition rates in the nation, and have built their programs specifically for real adults with real schedules. There are no rigid class times or be here at 9 AM sharp lectures. Instead, you can study when it actually fits your life. Whether that's at night, early in the mornings, on the weekends, or whenever you've got a spare hour and a cup of coffee, which, let's be honest, is way more realistic. They also help you stand out by offering opportunities to gain real-world experience, and you can transfer up to 90 credits towards a bachelor's degree. And it's not just for prior college either. You can also get credit for military and other work and life experiences too, which can help you finish your degree faster and for less money. They've also been voted one of the country's most innovative universities by US News & World Report. So, for my US audience, if there's something you've always wanted to pursue, whether that be a career shift, a degree you've never got to finish, or just proving to yourself that you can, then maybe this is your sign to start building towards something better. It is never too late to start. Check out the link in the description or go to snhu.edu/coffeehousecrime to learn more about SNHU and see what program might fit you. Thank you to SNHU for sponsoring this video. Go to snhu.edu/coffeehousecrime to find out more. And of course, thank you to you folks for your patience too. As you know, sponsors like this help keep the channel afloat, and I'm always happy to help show you guys something that helps improve your life. Now then, with that said, let's begin today's case. Please grab yourself a coffee, get comfortable, and let's investigate. This is the case of Sade Robinson. Howdy folks, our story today begins right here near the cliffs of Warnemont Park. The park can be found on the eastern outskirts of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is a bustling city on the western shore of Lake Michigan. Hailed as the Brew City, Milwaukee is known for its breweries, but it's also famous for its cheese festivals and German cuisine. Basically, all of life's best things. From the sunny beaches along the lake to its lively downtown skyline, Milwaukee is charming to everyone. In fact, its name even comes from a Native American term meaning pleasant land by the lake. However, nothing in life is always beautiful, and in April of 2024, Milwaukee's image was shattered when a series of horrific events unfolded right in the city's backyard. It was on the morning of April the 2nd that a man walking along the cliffs at Warnemont Park stumbled upon something in the sand. Now, at first, he wasn't quite sure what it was, and when he decided to actually take a closer look, well, that is when he didn't want to believe what was right in front of his eyes. It was in that moment that he realized that he had just accidentally discovered a severed human leg. And there was no doubt about it either. This belonged to a young adult female. Moments later, officers arrived at the crime scene, with their body cameras capturing the grim moment right here.
So this is Evan Millies. We've dealt with him before. Sometimes, mostly a good guy. He's gotten into this trouble a couple times, but good dude.
Okay.
So they walked down the S curve from Sheridan, started walking south just for fun, rough day on the beach. As they were walking, see that leg right there?
Yeah.
Said that it was up about approximately where the end of that stick, branch is.
By the bushes right there.
Yeah, bushes. Said that they saw it up
So
there.
it's like up on the hill, kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
So said that him and his buddy, who's in my squad right now, walked out, called us, and then when we came back, it was about, I don't know, maybe 7 feet east.
By the rock.
I moved it just for evidence purposes.
Okay, so this gets swept away?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I documented it well on body cam with different angles of where it was.
Okay, cool. All right, we gotta...
You want to tell me where it is?
You usually come this way?
Yeah.
Yeah? It's the first time you seen anything here? Yeah? It's the first time you seen anything like this? Yeah? Okay.
With this leg being found so close to the shoreline, many people initially believed that maybe this was an accident. However, when investigators took a closer look at the leg, they realized that, due to the nature of how it was dismembered, this very likely was homicide instead. But this would only be the beginning of the mystery, because that very same morning, and on the other side of town, police heard reports of a burned-out vehicle. And, as it turns out, these two separate cases would actually be related. As seen in this body cam footage, it was the charred remains of a Honda Civic, and while the interior was destroyed by the flames, the car itself was still clearly identifiable, and thankfully, they could even still make out its license plate. Just like the severed leg found on the cliffside, investigators would quickly rule this incident as no accident. The fire had obviously been set on purpose, and as fire crews examined the scorched vehicle, they also realized that they were recovering burnt clothing from the trunk and fragments of an iPhone in the ash. Of course, all of this was chilling enough already, but in the days that followed, more body parts began to surface right across the city. For example, a human foot was found off 31st and Galena streets not far from the train tracks that cut through the neighborhoods near downtown Milwaukee. And then, 16 days after the leg was discovered, and on April the 18th of 2024, a torso and a single arm were discovered along a secluded beach in South Milwaukee. With these two incidents being the third and fourth unexplained crime scene, this really was beginning to concern officers. And when they realized that the limbs all looked like they had come from the same person, they were beginning to wonder if maybe this was all connected to one victim and one killer. However, at this point in the investigation, there was still one vital piece missing. Of course, that being the victim's head. As investigators painstakingly connected all of the evidence, DNA analysis would finally return with one tragic conclusion: that all of the scattered remains belonged to a 19-year-old college student who had been reported missing only several days earlier. A student who also seemed to be connected to the burnt-out car and the license plate. And tragically, her name was Sade Robinson. Now, Sade was not only a student, but also a local resident. Born on May 10, 2004, to her parents Sheena Scarborough and Carlos Robinson, Sade was well loved by her family. Originally from Vicksburg in Mississippi, the family then relocated north to Milwaukee when she was only 2 years old. She shared the home with her parents and her younger sister Adriana Reams, who looked up to her not only as a sister, but also as a best friend and a mentor while navigating through her own teenage years. Growing up in Milwaukee, Sade attended Riverside University High School, where teachers and classmates knew her for her bright smile, her kindness, and the positivity that she'd brought into every room. And by the time that she approached her young adulthood, Sade was a student at Milwaukee Area Technical College, and at the time of her death was actually pursuing a degree in criminal justice. She was also known for her strong academic record, and was said to be hardworking, focused, and ambitious. Now, outside of her studies, Sade worked 2 jobs, that being one at the Wisconsin Country Club alongside her sister, and at Pizza Shuttle, which is a local restaurant. To make all of this even more tragic, Sade was only weeks away from completing her college degree at the time of her disappearance. She was excited about her future, and was even considering a career either in law enforcement or the military. So, obviously, her life was not only full of promise with a supportive family and close friends behind her, but she was also ready for the next chapter of her life, which likely would have done good for the greater community. So, with Sade being both young and single at the time, she was looking for someone to share her life with. And with that in mind, in the month leading up to April 2nd, she decided to take to the world of dating apps to see who she could find. We're going to come back to that in a short while, but for now, let me just highlight that she was young, happy at the start of her adult life, and of course was looking for love. With Sade's name now connected to the burned-out vehicle and multiple limbs found across town, police were sadly confident that she had passed away. And so, with this now an active murder investigation, they did what all good officers do and checked the city's surveillance network. It turns out that Milwaukee is absolutely blanketed in surveillance cameras, from restaurants and bars right the way through to buses and bus stops. So, as you can probably guess, they had a lot to work with. They decided to review all of the footage with a kind of two-prong approach, beginning with the moment she was last seen alive and working forwards, and also where her burned-out vehicle was and working backwards. So, let's begin on the night that she disappeared and when she was last reported to be seen at a seafood restaurant named The Twisted Fisherman. And this is where things get immediately interesting. Investigators learned that on April 1st of 2024, Sade had arranged a first date with a man that she had been chatting with. She told him in one of her messages that she was feeling seafood, and then headed out to meet him. Surveillance footage taken at the restaurant shows Sade sitting at the bar with this unknown man. The two were seen eating and drinking together for around about an hour, before then leaving later that evening. Staff would later tell investigators that the man in the footage had actually previously worked here too. So, if they were wanting to look for this man, then they actually already had a lead. From The Twisted Fisherman, traffic cameras followed Sade's Honda Civic into downtown Milwaukee, where the pair were seen stopping at Duke's on Water, which is a busy bar on North Water Street. From here, her Honda Civic can be seen pulling up at 6:33 p.m. Sade then stepped out of the driver's seat, while her date stepped out of the passenger door, and together they then crossed the street and headed in towards the bar. Inside, more surveillance footage showed them laughing, talking, and even hugging at the counter as they ordered drinks. It was a couple of hours later and at around 9 p.m. that the two then left together, and tragically, this would be the last time that Sade was ever properly seen alive on camera. From here on out, investigators would now have to lean heavily on other types of evidence. For example, phone tower data and a location sharing app that Sade used with friends would track her phone leaving downtown and then heading south, where she then stopped near a house on South 39th Street. It was at 9:24 p.m. that a home security camera caught the property's back gate swinging open. The camera then detected two shadows which were consistent with two people. It is likely that Sade and this man moved through the backyard before then heading on upstairs. Cell phone tower data would also confirm that Sade's phone stayed in that small radius for a little over 3 hours, and during that time, she never appeared on any other camera. At around 12:45 AM on April the 2nd, movement inside the house stopped, and then, a few minutes later, another camera in the alley behind the home caught a Honda Civic pulling away before then heading south and then turning back towards the city. Traffic footage and phone data would later show it passing through the area near Sade's downtown unit, but building surveillance cameras would also confirm that she never actually made it back home. Instead, it was determined that her phone kept moving. It crossed into Milwaukee's River West neighborhood before then pausing near Pleasant Valley Park and then heading across the city towards the lake. Between 2:45 AM and 3 AM, data placed the phone near Warnemont Park, that being the same area where her leg would later be discovered. And at around 2:50 AM, a nearby pump house camera captured a vehicle matching her Civic entering the area. A lone figure can then be seen walking towards the beach, where it was making multiple trips between the shoreline and a service road before finally leaving around 90 minutes later. Now, of course, all of this was extraordinarily suspicious behavior for police officers to find. And soon after these discoveries, yet another piece of footage would surface. But this time, unlike the other stationary cameras, this one was from a bus. The bus was passing through Lisbon Avenue just as the fire began to burn in the nearby parking lot, and in the foreground, a figure can be seen walking away just as the fire began. In a fortunate moment, yet unfortunate for the mysterious figure, this was the kind of surveillance footage that nobody could predict or avoid. It was just pure happenstance, but nevertheless, it was crucial for officers. They noticed that the man wore dark pants, a grey hooded sweatshirt, and carried a large tan backpack that looked full. A surveillance camera above a liquor store nearby would also catch another angle of the fire. In that moment, two people can be seen in front of the store, one wearing a blue jacket and the other holding an umbrella. The woman in the blue jacket later told detectives that she saw a white male stepping out of the Civic's driver's seat before then flicking a lighter into the car and walking away as if nothing had happened. And footage taken from another bus would show the same man in the same hoodie and the same backpack boarding that bus with cash and then riding south down 35th Street. And then, at around 8:35 AM that morning, he then asked to be let off early and not at an official bus stop. It is worth noting here that this was near Lakefield Drive, and, rather conveniently, was only an 8-minute walk away from the home where Sade's phone had last been active. So, I am sure that by now you are likely tired of all of the surveillance footage that I've shown you. However, at 8:43 AM, a final camera, which was mounted on a house across the street, would capture the same man walking through the gate of the property, and again, he was still wearing the same jeans, same hoodie, and same backpack. By that point in time, Sade's car had already been recovered and identified, and with thanks to the Live 360 app that she'd used, her family and friends had given all location data to officers. And so, with her movements now mapped out and plenty of surveillance footage to go on, officers were very interested to find out who that mysterious man was. And when officers made their way down to the Twisted Fisherman to ask the staff if maybe they knew who this guy was, well, they would be in for a surprise. And it turns out that that man was not smart at all, and I mean like really stupid, because it just so happened that he used to be a former employee there. And so, with that said, let's talk about 33-year-old Maxwell Stephen Anderson. With a name to go with his face, detectives began to check him out. They secured his dating app activity, his phone records, and his employment history, which, to be honest with you, he had already technically done himself. As you may have imagined, the data confirmed that Maxwell had in fact arranged the date with Sade and had also been present at each location that she had visited that evening. Not only that, but the data also verified that his phone activity had mirrored the exact route taken by Sade's Honda Civic from start right through to death. Of course, this was clearly enough for officers to grow extraordinarily suspicious of Maxwell. So, police moved quickly to obtain a search warrant for his property. And when inside, Well, that is when they recovered clothes and materials that perfectly matched what they had seen in the surveillance footage, that including the dark hoodie and the tan backpack. It became quite clear that this case was now rapidly taking shape, and not only was Maxwell the last person to be seen with Sade Robinson, but also was the only person seen moving through the locations which were now tied to her death. And so, soon enough, police decided to arrest Maxwell during a traffic stop near his own home, and once they did, they found out a few more key details about his history.
Any weapons on you, sir?
No.
Born in 1990 and raised in the suburbs west of Milwaukee, Max grew up in a wealthy family of four. As a teenager, he attended Catholic Memorial High School, and all of those who knew him back then said that he always seemed, well, a little bit off. Teachers described him as socially awkward and withdrawn, and it was the kind of awkwardness that would make other classmates nervous. So, even from a young age, Max was already showing troubling signs. However, things would only get worse over time. It was around 2020 that his awkwardness turned into resentment when his parents filed for divorce. And from that moment onwards, he didn't just appear troubled anymore, but actually was troubled. By his early 20s, Max had now built quite the impressive repertoire with the local police department. And by impressive, I obviously mean that he was a little shit towards officers. Between 2009 and 2010, he was arrested for a string of minor offenses including fleeing from the police, insulting police officers, breaking a window at a house that wasn't his, and multiple underage alcohol violations. Now, most of these charges would lead to citations rather than serious punishment. However, it was becoming clear, especially by now, that this was an emerging pattern. Maxwell was becoming impulsive, aggressive, and dependent on alcohol, and rather than fix the problem or mature out of it, he seemed to be doubling down instead. So, you might be surprised to learn that back in April of 2011, Max joined the Navy and maybe even desired to turn his life around. However, not even this redirection would last very long, because not even a year into his service, he was discharged under unknown circumstances. He would never actually return to the Navy, and by 2014, his behavior was becoming so bad that he was basically burning every remaining bridge he had left. It was in the summer of 2014, and while he visited his mother's house in Delafield, that things would unfortunately turn violent. Police were called to the property to arrest Maxwell on reports that he'd stolen a vehicle, crashed it, and then actually hurt his own relative so badly that he'd broken their ribs. And although we don't know what the argument was about or what kind of influence he was under, what we do know is that Max basically walked away from this shitstorm without any consequence whatsoever. By 2015, his family, or at least the ones who were still patient enough to keep him around, were growing increasingly concerned about his mental health. And so, they did what all good family members do, and tried to gently persuade him to see someone about it. And in response, well, he basically punched a few holes in the wall, smashed up their phones, and then threw glass at them. Look, by now, it is kind of obvious that Maxwell had absolutely no control over his feelings, emotions, or thought patterns. But the big problem here is that he never faced any consequences for his horrible actions. This is a man who was given plenty of warnings from officers and plenty of support from his family. And yet, despite all of this gentle discipline, he never took any time to try to better himself. And the results, they would be catastrophic. Between 2014 and 2022, Max continued to rack up a bunch of serious charges, including domestic abuse, drunk driving, and disorderly conduct. Yet, even still, and time again, he was somehow released with almost no consequences. Throughout this period of his life, he drifted from job to job and was mostly known as a local bartender, or occasionally a door guy at Milwaukee's venues like The Rave, Duke's on Water, and Victor's. And as of early 2024, he was working at a sports bar on the west side of town named Dugout 54. Now, at least on paper, Maxwell did appear to be just another usual bar worker in his 30s. He rocked the late nights, was part of a high turnover industry, and basically lived paycheck to paycheck. That is what the general population would see in him anyway. However, all of his previous partners would report him as a dark and dangerous man who was controlling, secretive, and manipulative. Basically, certainly not the kind of guy that you would ever want to be close with. One ex-girlfriend who dated him would even tell officers about his obsession with hidden compartments in his home. Apparently, he was obsessed with making false bookshelves, space behind his bathroom cabinet, and even a closet hidden behind his TV unit. She also described him as emotionally volatile, secretive about his whereabouts, and extraordinarily confrontational. Apparently, the two were out together one evening when, all of a sudden, he got himself into a bar fight with another man merely for looking at her. Other ex-partners would give very similar reports. They talked about his heavy drinking, social awkwardness, and as someone who couldn't hold down a stable relationship despite constantly seeking out new ones. Another woman, who had briefly dated him in early 2024, also believes that he had spiked her drinks on multiple occasions. Which, is not the kind of man that you would want in your life at all. Investigators would later discover that, simultaneously, Max was actually cheating on multiple people using apps like Hinge, Tinder, and Bumble. And, according to his history, he was spending several hours a day on these platforms. As you may have guessed, this is precisely how he found Sade Robinson. And as soon as the two connected, he latched onto her like a parasite. It wouldn't take long for Sade to feel relatively comfortable with Max after that, and as soon as she did, she agreed to meet him for dinner and drinks. And, unfortunately, you know exactly how that ended. There is no mystery to this part of the story, folks. Considering the amount of surveillance footage and evidence available, the authorities had plenty to go on. And so, when Maxwell Anderson's trial began on May the 27th, 2025, it was kind of obvious that he was going down. The prosecution had a mountain of evidence to choose from, including data, surveillance footage, phone records, and witness statements. They began by establishing how Sade had met Maxwell, highlighting that their initial connection was through a dating app, which then escalated to text messages, before them then arranging to meet on the evening of April the 1st, 2024. The terrifying thing here, folks, is that Sade was doing what tens of millions of us do every single year. It appears that now more than 15% of the Western population have actually met their partner through a dating app, and those who have met someone online at least once in their life is sky high. And so, theoretically, through the hundreds of millions of us who have tried a dating app and met someone online in person before, this easily could have been you or me. As we know, surveillance footage and phone records confirmed that both Sade and Max were together all night, and, of course, everyone was curious to know what happened inside his home. Photos taken from inside his home on the night that she died are mostly private, but it does tragically turn out that he had taken images of her lying face down on the couch, both limp and unresponsive, which basically translates to this sick man taking images of her as some sort of trophy. The prosecution also spoke about the hidden spaces found inside of his home, and also claimed that they all pointed towards a person who craved control, secrecy, and isolation. And while the defense objected about their relevance, the prosecution would fight back and say that it showed that his home was designed to hide and conceal evidence. The main investigators of the case would also testify that Max had remained in the home with her body for several hours, and during this time, he had almost certainly dismembered her with saws, knives, and an axe. And in addition to these weapons, they also found gloves, tarps, and cleaning products inside the property. Meanwhile, Max's defense were quite clearly fighting an uphill battle. However, they would still have a go. They argued that there was no direct video or audio of the killing, and her entire body was never fully recovered. Which is kind of insane to think about, because most of Sade's body was found and confirmed to belong to her. Anyway, thankfully, the jury would see right through the baloney, and on June the 6th of 2025, and not even 2 weeks into his trial, and only after just 45 minutes of deliberation, they all found him guilty on all counts. As a result, Maxwell Stephen Anderson was officially convicted of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, arson, and hiding a corpse, and was therefore sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
On behalf of myself and my family, I'd like to say a few things. First, to Sade's family, There are no words that I can share that will reduce your pain. You are all in my thoughts every single day. I'm not asking you to forgive anybody or anything. That is between you and your God.
This demon and his whole ass attorney, they knew exactly what he did and what he was responsible for. They took us through extreme agony and pain. We are already dealing with so much trauma. You will be dealt with eternally, like I stated. But Your Honor, Judge, I'm asking that this demon be respectfully returned back to hell as soon as possible. That's what I'm requesting through the court. Please return him back to hell as soon as possible.
When given the chance to speak, Max still pathetically maintained his innocence. Not only did he tell the court that he wasn't responsible for her death, but also that it must all be some sort of crazy misunderstanding. He would even then go on to say that he planned to appeal his conviction.
My deepest and most sincere condolences go out to Sade's family, as well as everyone else affected by this tragedy. That being said, Your Honor, I took this to trial without ever once trying to make a plea deal of any kind, because I did not commit these crimes. And so I plan to appeal my convictions.
This entire case is angering at best, and to be honest with you, it's stories like this that slowly erode my faith in the system. Max showed severely troubling warning signs for multiple years, and had even beaten up his own family members. And yet, despite this, he always got away with nothing more than a simple slap on the wrist. The main issue here is that those who were slowly introduced to Maxwell could probably see the red flags over time, and they could use that time to assess whether they wanted to grow close to him or not. But again, with Sade finding Maxwell over a dating app, she had no time to assess his nature or personality, and was essentially thrown into the deep end with dinner and drinks. In the aftermath of this horrible story, family, friends, classmates, co-workers, and even strangers all came together to remember Sade. And in that moment, they celebrated her spirit, her humor, her warmth, and, of course, the future that she was building for herself. Her favorite color, which was pink, became a symbol for the way that her community remembered her. And in the weeks after the trial, her loved ones organized what soon became known as the Pink Day Tribute. In a protest against his ugly mark, people arrived outside Maxwell's old home wearing pink shirts, ribbons, and balloons. They wanted to reclaim his House of Horrors as a place to remember Sade instead, and so, in response, they left candles, flowers, handwritten messages, and even posters in her memory. A scholarship fund was also created in her name, designed to support the students at Riverside University High School where she once studied. For her family, that scholarship represented far more than just her remembrance. It was both a continuation and a way for Sade's life to uplift others. Across Milwaukee, pink ribbons, murals, vigils, and memory events still continue to serve reminders, not just of what was lost, but also of what still matters. That safety, compassion, and the protection of young women is still a very critical issue in America in this year. By the way, and just to put it out there are many conversations and theories about whether Maxwell might actually be a serial killer, and even law enforcement have these questions. And although there is no direct evidence to prove this yet, there are still several missing women in the area. And as for how Sade's body was discovered, well, this could potentially be Maxwell's MO. Again, this is only a theory for now, but the question is, could Sade potentially be just one of many victims to Maxwell Anderson? Well, tragically, yes. Anyway folks, that's pretty much all I have on this video today, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. But before I go, I'd love to know what you think about this one. Do you think that Maxwell could in fact be a serial killer? Because the way that he disposed of Sade's body so cold and callous and calculated, that seems professional. If you're new here, please feel free to subscribe too. I do strange, dark, and disturbing cases every single week. And thank you again to Southern New Hampshire University for sponsoring this video. Go to snhu.edu/coffeehousecrime to find out more. You can also find Coffee House Crime on Instagram, Patreon, Facebook, and Spotify. And the podcast is going great so far, so please check it out. Anyway folks, thank you again so much for watching, I really do appreciate it. And as always, I'll see you again very soon for another video, likely next week. Until that moment arrives though, remember to look after yourselves and each other. And of course, stay safe and stay curious. Thank you, and goodbye.